Have you ever been locked in a discussion, maybe a planning session or even just, online somewhere, where someone makes this huge sweeping declaration, something that sounds amazing, like totally game-changing?
Oh, yeah. And then the second you ask them to, back it up, show the evidence.
Right. They suddenly retreat. They pull back to this tiny, safe, almost boring little point that, well, nobody could possibly argue with.
It's like a magic trick, isn't it? Intellectually speaking. You challenge the big, shiny thing, and poof, they vanish behind some technicality. You feel like you're arguing with smoke. They might say something like, our new program guarantees 100% success for everyone involved. That's the big, bold promise.
Okay.
But then you push for beta, and suddenly it's, well, by success, we just meant we provided the resources, and we definitely did that.
So that original ambitious claim, it's just gone. Replaced by something undeniable, sure, but completely unhelpful for what you're actually discussing.
And you're left feeling frustrated, but you can't quite put your finger on the rhetorical move that just happened.
Yeah, the switcheroo. And they retreat, they survive the challenge, and then what happens? A week later.
That same big, bold claim is back. Back in the press release, back on the meeting agenda, totally unchanged.
Like nothing happened.
That specific pattern, that retreat and return cycle, that's what we're digging into today. And naming this thing the Motte-and-Bailey maneuver, it's less about catching someone out, a gotcha moment.
Right.
It's much more about trying to stabilize what we mean when we talk.
So the material we're drawing on today, these excerpts from the Motte-and-Bailey Maneuver Toolkit, it doesn't just give this slippery concept a name. It gives us a kind of field guide. It helps us spot the four big tells, the signs it's happening. And crucially, it offers a playbook, a set of procedures to defend against it.
We're really diving deep into a specialized toolkit here, one designed for, let's say, precision in communication. Our mission today is basically threefold. Recognize this Motte-and-Bailey maneuver, or M&B as we'll probably call it.
Okay.
Understand the powerful reasons, both psychological and systemic, why it works so well, especially now. And then finally, figure out how to use these procedures to lock down the scope of a claim before it kind of drifts away from you.
Okay, so here's the big question then, the one that's going to guide us through this deep dive. How can understanding of all things, the defensive setup of a medieval castle, specifically, knowing the difference between that small central stone keep and the big, open, exposed outer courtyard, how can that knowledge help you, like right now, stabilize debates? Whether it's public policy or team goals, or maybe even next quarter's marketing plan?
It's a great question. We'll definitely build out that whole castle analogy and give you the answer later on.
Sounds good.
And just a quick note for you listening, the AI persona that helped us pull together and synthesize all this complex material, plus all the links to the original research and the full toolkit we're discussing, it's all down there in the description for you to check out later.
Great. So let's get to work on these definitions then.
Yeah.
Okay, let's unpack the core idea here. This Motte-and-Bailey thing, it's defined by this strategic movement, right, between two different kinds of claims, 2 points in the intellectual map. So what are these two poles? What defines them?
Right. We need to start with the Bailey. You should think of the Bailey as the big claim. It's sweeping, it's bold, it sounds really appealing, maybe morally satisfying even. And this is key, it's usually pretty hard to defend with actual evidence.
Okay.
It's like the big, fertile, open courtyard of that medieval castle. That's where you live day to day, grow your crops, have the market. It's comfortable. Rhetorically speaking, it's where you get the most social credit, maybe the most funding. But it's also wide open. It's exposed to attack. Meaning it's the hardest part to actually defend when someone comes asking for proof.
So if I stand up and claim this new tax plan we've got, it's going to eliminate poverty right here in our state. That's the Bailey, isn't it?
That's a perfect Bailey. It's bold, gets attention, probably wins some votes, but proving it, especially right away, almost impossible.
Okay, so that's the Bailey. What happens when it gets challenged, when the conceptual enemies are at the gates, so to speak?
That's when the claimant pulls back. They execute this strategic retreat to the moat. Now, the moat is the opposite. It's safe, it's easily defensible. Often, it's just a truism.
A truism, like something obviously true.
Yeah, or at least very, very hard to argue against. Think of the moat as the stone keep, that central tower in the castle. It's secure, logically sound. Often, it's a statement that's so narrow or so banal that it's pretty much beyond dispute.
That's but, right.
The big but is that it's almost entirely useless for supporting the huge argument they were originally making with the Bailey.
Okay, back to the tax plan example. I claimed it would eliminate poverty. That's the Bailey. I get challenged. So I retreat to the Malad, saying, well, look, all we meant was that the plan is designed to shift some resources from higher earners to lower earners.
That's it. That statement is, well, probably true by definition of the plan. It's easily defended, but it is absolutely not the same thing as eliminating poverty.
So the definition we're working with here from the source material is key. M&B is promoting that big, sweeping claim.
The Bailey.
Right, the Bailey. Then, when challenged, retreating to the safe truism.
The Motte.
The Motte.
Yeah.
And then, this is the crucial part later on, reinflating that original bold claim without any new evidence to back it up. It's the back and forth, the oscillation, that really defines it.
That oscillation is precisely why the metaphor is so powerful. It was a philosopher, Nicholas Shackel, who actually coined the term Motte-and-Bailey doctrines back in 2005. He spotted this happening in academic philosophy debates. He realized the core mechanism was this. People want to, well, enjoy the Bailey. They want the social benefits, the rhetorical force of making a strong claim. But they also need a safe place to run to survive when that big claim gets put under pressure or even refuted.
This is like an argument survival tactic.
Yeah.
Shackel laid the groundwork academically, but it really took off later.
It did. It gained much wider traction, became more standardized, maybe about a decade later. Writers like Scott Alexander, for example, started using really clear modern examples from politics, tech, social issues.
And that popularization just showed how familiar this whole pattern felt to everyone, right? This kind of debate rhythm.
It really resonated, and that central quote from the toolkit we're using, it sums up the strategy perfectly. Enjoy the Bailey, survive in the Mon.
It's about getting the benefits of the big claim without ever really having to pay the price, the burden of proof that should come with it.
You get the rewards of the bold assertion without accepting the proportional evidentiary load.
Okay, so if this whole maneuver is designed to sort of dodge accountability, it must rely on specific weaknesses in how we communicate. The source material points to 4 main mechanisms that keep this cycle going.
Yeah, 4 key things. The first one, and it's maybe the most fundamental, is just simple ambiguity. If the claim itself is never defined precisely, if words like success or harm or improvement are left deliberately vague,
And then they can mean anything.
right, the scope can expand or contract whenever needed. The person making the claim needs that vagueness, that lack of operational definition to be able to make the retreat smoothly.
Okay, ambiguity is number 1. What's second?
Second is the definition shuffle. This is where that ambiguity gets, well, weaponized. A key term suddenly flips its meaning.
How so?
Well, it might have a really loaded, broad sense when they're selling the idea that's the Bailey definition, but then the moment they have to defend it, it snaps back to a really narrow, maybe even trivial sense, the Motte definition.
Can you give an example?
Sure. Imagine a software company claims its new product offers total system security. Okay. The Bailey definition of security implies it's like impervious to everything, hacker-proof.
Right, total security.
But then there's a breach or someone asks tough questions. Suddenly, the Motte definition of security comes out. Oh, well, security just meant the code passed our basic internal review checklist. The word security just did a quick change act right in front of you.
I see. That's sneaky. What's the third mechanism?
Third, and this is often the one that makes you, the listener, feel the most frustrated, is the burden of proof slip. This is the evidence dodge.
Okay.
The claimant strategically offers evidence, but only for the narrow, safe, easy-to-defend Motte claim.
Right, the small claim.
But then, and this is the slip, they act as if that little bit of evidence somehow covers the entire huge demanding Bailey claim, which still has 0 actual support. They provide proof for the small thing, but claim victory for the big thing.
Okay, that makes sense.
The fourth is what makes it a cycle, not just a one-off retreat. It's the reinflation loop. This is like the psychological reset button.
How does that work?
Once the immediate pressure's off, the reporter leaves, the meeting ends, the critic gives up asking.
Yeah.
The original big, bold Bailey claim just reappears. It comes back into the discussion, completely unchanged. And this happens even though absolutely no new evidence has been presented to justify bringing it back.
It just pops back up.
Pops right back up, ready for the next challenge, ready to start the cycle all over again. And it's the cyclical nature, this constant reinflation, that makes the M&B maneuver so uniquely damaging to actually understanding each other.
Okay, understanding those 4 internal gears. Ambiguity, Definition shuffle, burden slip, reinflation, that's the first step. Now let's talk about the outward signs, the tells. If you're in conversation, maybe right now, what are the 4 distinct things you can look for? Like a field guide for spotting this in the wild.
Right, the observable tells. The first, and maybe the most obvious one, is the ambiguity gradient. You need to track how the scope of the claim changes depending on the situation.
The gradient, like a slope.
Sort of. Think about how steep the drop is. If a new policy gets announced in a big press release and it's described as, say, ending systemic injustice across the entire city, that's broad. That's sell mode.
Okay, Big Bailey.
But then you look at the actual legal document, the implementation plan, and it only talks about streamlining 2 specific bureaucratic forms within Department B. That's narrow. That's defend mode.
Wow, quite a difference.
That dramatic decrease in scope the moment accountability looms. That's the ambiguity gradient in action.
Got it. What's the second tell?
The second is spotting that definition shuffle happening in real time. This takes careful listening.
Right.
Think about a debate, maybe online, about free speech on some platform. In the Bailey state, when they're promoting the platform, free speech might mean allowing absolutely everything, even really offensive stuff, maybe to maximize clicks or engagement.
Right, the controversial Bailey.
But then someone challenges them about the real-world harm that results from that policy, and suddenly the speaker retreats to the Motte. Oh, well, by free speech, we just meant, adhering strictly to the First Amendment of the U.S. Constitution.
Which is a much narrower, legally defined concept with actual limits.
Precisely. The term free speech just dramatically changed its working definition, maybe even mid-sentence. That's the shuffle.
Okay, ambiguity gradient, definition shuffle. Third tell.
The third is watching for the burden of proof slip. This one can be subtle sometimes.
Also.
Imagine a tech startup claiming their fancy new AI platform removes all human bias from hiring decisions. Big claim, right? Bailey territory.
Definitely.
So maybe you're a skeptical investor, you ask for proof. What do they give you? They might hand over a dense white paper showing that the platform, when tested on one specific old data set of resumes, it reduced gender disparity scores by, say, 10%.
Okay, so it did something.
It did something. They provided proof for a modest improvement that's a Motte, but they are still arguing and probably accepting praise and funding based on the idea that they eliminated all bias the Bailey. The burden slipped. They proved the merely difficult thing, not the near impossible thing they claim.
Ah, okay. They met a lower bar, claimed the higher one. And the final tell.
Finally, you have to watch for the reinflation loop. This one is about time. You need to monitor how the claim changes or doesn't change over weeks or months.
So it's about tracking it.
You got it. Let's say a policy was challenged hard in January, and the proponents were forced to admit it was really just a small pilot program in one district. That's the Motte they retreated to.
Okay.
But then the quarterly report comes out in March, and the same speaker is back talking about how they've revolutionized the entire sector. And crucially, they don't cite any new evidence from outside that original small pilot.
They just went back to the big claim.
They went right back. That's the reinflation. You're absolutely seeing M&B in action then. Because legitimate refinement, genuine learning, it sticks to the new, narrower evidence. M&B defiantly snaps back to the big, unsupported general claim as soon as the coast is clear.
It really is a pattern, not just a single mistake.
It is. And it's important to realize this is a sophisticated kind of move. Like Nicholas Shackel pointed out, M&B isn't just one simple fallacy you find listed in a logic textbook. It's more like a family of related moves, all involving shifts in scope and meaning.
Other related moves, too.
Yeah, he mentioned things like equivocating fulcra, which sounds complicated, but the point is we're dealing with a whole spectrum of ways language can be used to shift the ground under your feet mid-debate, all to hang on to rhetorical power.
Okay, this is fascinating and pretty useful for navigating tricky conversations. If you, listening right now, appreciate getting complex ideas like this broken down into actionable knowledge, you're getting the language to spot these rhetorical moves that can really destabilize a conversation, please take a second to like this content, subscribe to the channel if you haven't already, and maybe ring that notification bell so you never miss another deep dive like this one. All right, let's dig into the why now. Why is this Motte-and-Bailey thing so sticky, so persistent? It can't just be deliberate manipulation all the time, can it? It seems deeper.
You're right. It often goes deeper than conscious strategy. It's really rooted in some fundamental aspects of, human psychology.
Like what?
Well, the first big driver is something called motivated reasoning. We like to think we reason to find the neutral truth, right?
Ideally, yeah.
But a lot of research suggests we often reason backwards. We use our reasoning skills primarily to arrive at conclusions we already prefer, conclusions that feel good or fit our existing beliefs.
Okay, so how does M&B fit into that?
Ambiguity is the key. It provides the intellectual wiggle room we need. If I really want to believe that this big, expensive project I push for is a huge success,
Right.
the Motte-and-Bailey lets me do that. The Motte allows me to technically defend the project's integrity, maybe by saying something like, look, we followed the plan exactly as written. That's defensible, the Motte.
Okay.
But the Bailey lets me simultaneously claim its glorious success. This plan totally solved the problem. It lets me preserve my preferred conclusion, my project was great, without having to deal with the messy, inconvenient facts that might challenge the Bailey version.
So it's a way to feel right, even when the big picture isn't quite there. That's the personal side.
Right.
What else drives it?
The second big psychological driver is identity protective cognition. This is about our group affiliations. We humans are social creatures, and we have a powerful inclination to believe things that align with our group's identity and dismiss things that challenge it.
We want to fit in and protect our group's worldview.
Pretty much. And the M&D toggle is almost perfectly designed to navigate the social pressures this creates. Think about the social signals. By loudly asserting the big, bold Bailey claim, something like, we are the only ones who truly stand for freedom, or our approach is the only path to justice, I signal my strong loyalty and belief to my group, my coalition.
Okay, signals loyalty in words.
Right. But then when outsiders challenge that strong claim with, awkward facts or counter-arguments, I can quickly retreat to the safe Motte. Maybe the Motte is just, well, freedom is important, or we value justice. This lets me avoid that uncomfortable feeling, that cognitive dissonance of holding a belief that's directly contradicted by evidence.
So you keep your group status with the Bailey, but you protect your own sense of logical consistency by having the Motte ready.
It's like a dual communication strategy. One message for the in-group, reinforcing solidarity, and a separate escape hatch, the Motte, for when the out-group starts asking tough questions about the logic.
Wow, okay, so psychology sets the stage. But you mentioned systemic reasons, too. The environment we operate in.
Absolutely. It's not just in our heads. The systems we live and work in often actively reward this kind of oscillation. Think about institutional incentives.
Like in companies or
Yeah.
government?
Everywhere, especially in areas like media, marketing, tech, even politics. There's this built-in tension.
What tension?
On the one hand, things like media headlines, marketing campaigns, pitches to investors, even just quick updates in meetings, they all reward punchy generalities. Big, simple, exciting claims.
Those are the Baileys?
Those are the Baileys. They're catchy, they grab attention, they drive engagement, they might justify huge budgets or valuations, and importantly, they fit neatly into a headline or a 30-second soundbite. But then you have the other side of the house. You have the people who actually have to make things work or ensure things are legal. Compliance teams, lawyers, engineers writing detailed specifications, the operations folks.
We need the details.
They need precision. They absolutely require the Motte. They need the specific, measurable, verifiable claim to avoid lawsuits, to build something that functions, to manage risk.
So the system itself creates this split personality.
It really does. You have this constant pressure to sell the big, exciting Bailey, to get the project approved, to get the funding, to get the votes. But then you have to defend and operate based on the narrow, precise Motte to maintain technical integrity or legal compliance.
That sets up the perfect conditions for this constant cycle, doesn't it? Sell as Bailey, defend as Motte.
It's the perfect storm. It permeates everything from internal company memos all the way up to international policy debates. The system itself is practically incentivizing this kind of rhetorical drift.
Okay, this leads us to a really important point, a kind of guardrail we need to put up. If we start seeing M&B everywhere, labeling every single time someone modifies a claim, well, we risk overusing the term.
Crying wolf, basically. Something like that. We could end up committing false positives, accusing people unfairly, and maybe even paralyzing legitimate communication where people are genuinely trying to refine their ideas. So you, the listener, need to be careful and precise here. When is a shift in scope just a necessary, honest update, and when is it actually this strategic dodge? The M&B.
Okay, that's crucial.
Yeah.
What's the key distinction then? How do we tell the difference?
The core difference usually comes down to two things: acknowledgement and permanence.
Acknowledgement and permanence. Explain.
Okay, let's say someone starts with a broad hypothesis. Maybe this teaching method works for all students. Then, new research comes out showing it only works well for students over a certain age. If the person then says explicitly, okay, you know what? Our initial claim was too broad. Based on this new data, we now only claim this method is effective for students aged 10 and up. And this is the permanence part. The claim stays narrowed in future discussions.
Then that's just learning. That's progress.
Right, that's legitimate refinement. They acknowledge the change, they base it on new information, and the change stuck. We've learned something, updated our understanding. The M&B maneuver, remember, is defined by that strategic reinflation later on, popping back to the broad claim without new data.
Okay, so acknowledging the narrowing and sticking to it is key. What else separates legitimate change from M&B?
We also absolutely have to distinguish it from genuine Bayesian updating. This is just the normal process of how knowledge should advance.
Yeah.
We constantly adjust our beliefs based on new evidence coming in.
Like in science or medicine.
Good example. Let's say a new drug comes out, and initially it's marketed as, generally effective for treating condition X. That's the initial, maybe slightly Bailey-ish claim.
Okay.
But then clinical trials reveal, it causes serious side effects in patients who also have condition Z, but it works great for everyone else. So the company updates the guidelines, restricts the drug's use, saying, don't use if you have condition Z.
That's not M&B.
Not at all. That's a necessary, evidence-driven Bayesian update. The scope of the claim, who should use this drug, changed because new, relevant, explicit data came in that forced the change. And that restriction is now a permanent part of the claim. The M&B happens when the scope changes without that explicit new data justification, or snaps back later.
Got it. The toolkit also helps us draw lines between M&B and other similar-sounding rhetorical moves, right? Like, how is it different from just moving the goalposts?
That's a good one to clarify. Moving the goalposts is about changing the criteria for success after the fact.
Okay.
Like, if I promise my boss I'll increase sales by 10%, that's the goal, then I only increase them by 8%. If I then say, well, the real goal was always just to improve team morale, I've moved the goalposts for success. M&B isn't about the success criteria. It's about the meaning or scope of the claim itself, flipping back and forth between broad Bailey and narrow Motte.
So different targets. What about just plain old equivocation? Isn't M&B just a fancy form of that?
It's related, but distinct. Straight equivocation is when a key word changes its meaning within a single argument, often silently, to make a conclusion seem logical when it isn't.
Okay.
M&B adds a critical extra dimension, the temporal aspect, the retreat and return cycle, the movement across time, maybe across different audiences, the inflation, deflation, and reinflation loop. That's what makes M&D a distinct maneuver, more than just a single logical slip-up in one argument.
Right, the time element is key. And one more distinction, something about different contexts.
Yeah, domain partitioning. Look, it's totally normal and often necessary for, say, a large organization to communicate differently to different audiences.
Like a press release versus a technical manual.
Sure, a press release might simplify the benefits for the general public. A technical spec needs to detail all the limitations and liabilities for engineers or lawyers. That's fine. That's necessary partitioning. The problem only arises if those different claims become logically inconsistent, or if the simple claim wildly inflates what the technical specs actually support. The press release shouldn't promise the moon if the spec sheet says you only built a ladder.
Okay, so reserve the M&B label for that specific oscillation pattern over time, not just any change or different messaging.
Be precise with it. Use it surgically.
So why is it so important to be precise? What are the real costs if we just let M&B run rampant, if we don't check the systematic back and forth?
Oh, the consequences are really severe. They go way beyond just feeling frustrated in a single conversation.
Like what? What are the big costs?
Well, first, there are the epistemic costs. Epistemic just means relating to knowledge and how we know things. If our shared meanings for important words constantly erode, if we can't agree on a stable definition for terms like success, justice, safety, effective, what happens?
We can't really talk to each other meaningfully.
We end up talking past each other. Debates just dissolve into misunderstandings, or worse, into people drawing conclusions based purely on these shifting definitions, these equivocations. We lose the ability to build a functional, shared understanding of reality based on stable language. And that kind of breakdown is fertile ground for deep divisions and polarization.
Okay, so it damages our ability to know things together. What about more tangible costs?
Huge practical costs. You see this all the time, especially in government or large projects. A big policy initiative gets sold to the public based on a grand, sweeping Bailey promise, this will solve the housing crisis, or this will fix healthcare.
Right, the big sell.
But then, when it actually gets implemented, the policy turns out to be a much smaller, narrower Motte-and-Bailey. Maybe it's just a limited pilot program, or it only addresses one tiny aspect of the huge problem.
So there's a massive gap between promise and reality.
A massive expectation gap. This leads to wasted resources, money, and effort committed based on the grand Bailey promise. And it breeds deep public distrust, cynicism, because people feel like they were promised the Bailey, but what got delivered was the much smaller, less impactful mold.
That sounds incredibly damaging. And within organizations. Inside a company, for instance.
The organizational costs can be devastating too. They can literally sink projects. Imagine if the sales and marketing team is operating entirely on the Bailey version of what your product can do.
Selling the dream.
Selling the dream. But the engineering team, the quality assurance team, the support team, they're all working based on the much narrower, technically accurate version. What happens?
Constant conflict. Meetings that go nowhere. Missed deadlines. Angry customers.
You got it. Endless meeting churn, arguments over what done actually means, finger pointing, critical compliance issues getting missed because everyone's working off a different understanding of the scope. It's chaos.
Understanding how beliefs operate and really being able to stabilize the language we use to talk about them seems absolutely fundamental, whether you're, managing a small team project or debating huge national policies.
It truly is. And if you feel that your own conversations, maybe at work or in your community, could benefit from more clarity, more structure, more rigor in getting to the bottom of what people actually mean and believe, well, we strongly encourage you to check out the Free Street Epistemology course. It's available over at navigatingbeliefs.com. It's a great resource for honing your skills and navigating these kinds of potentially tricky conversations.
Okay, we've thoroughly diagnosed the problem, right? We understand the mechanics, the tells, the drivers, the serious costs. Now let's get to the solution. The toolkit emphasizes this isn't about winning an argument ideologically. It's about fixing the process. It's procedural.
That's the core idea. The fix is procedural rigor. Lock down the scope. Keep good records, keep receipts, as they say. Assign burdens of proof fairly. And, critically, track that reinflation loop. Don't let the Bailey sneak back in unnoticed.
So where do you start? Let's say you think you're seeing M&B happen in a meeting.
First step is rapid identification. Use those detection heuristics we talked about earlier. Before you even jump in, do a quick mental scan. Are you seeing that ambiguity gradient, the scope, shrinking under pressure?
Okay.
Are you hearing a key definition shuffle, the meaning of a word changing? Are you noticing a burden slip evidence being offered only for the small claim, not the big one? And have you seen this pattern before, the reinflation loop where the big claim came back?
So run through the checklist mentally. Once you think you've spotted it, what's next?
Then you move immediately to the keep receipts strategy. You need artifacts. You need documentation. Remember, M&B thrives in the fog of short memories and undocumented conversations. Writing things down is probably your single most powerful defense.
Okay, what kind of artifacts are we talking about? Like taking detailed minutes?
It can be simpler than full minutes. Start with a claim ledger. This could just be a shared document, maybe even a simple 2-column table. In one column, you track the broad sweeping statements. You note down the verbatim quote if you can, and maybe a timestamp or date.
And the other column?
The other column tracks the narrow, specific, defensible retreats. Again, quote it, timestamp it. By documenting both claims side by side, you make the oscillation, the back and forth, completely visible and undeniable. If someone uses the Mott defense today, but is back to the Bailey promise tomorrow, the ledger shows the switch clearly.
That makes the pattern explicit. What else?
Second, especially if you're dealing with really loaded or contested terms, maintain a rigorous definition ledger.
Defining the key terms.
Before you get deep into a discussion about, say, fairness or sustainability or efficiency, you need to establish the specific operational definition you all agree to use for this discussion. What does bias-free actually mean in the context of this specific AI model we're building?
Okay, agree on the definition.
And just as importantly, you might need to explicitly list disallowed alternative meanings. Say, okay, for today, success means achieving metric A. We are not using the looser definition B or the aspirational definition C right now. This helps prevent that slow, silent drift in meaning. It keeps the language stable.
Locking it down. What's the third artifact?
Third, you could use a shift map. This is basically just a simple timeline. Mark down when the claim seemed to expand and when it contracted. What triggered the shift? Was it a tough question? Was it a different audience? When did it reinflate back to the Bailey?
So visually tracking the movement.
Right. This helps you see the pattern over time, which is the hallmark of M&B. It helps distinguish genuine refinement, which usually involves a stable shift, from this strategic oscillation. It shows the claimant isn't just learning, they're maneuvering.
And the toolkit also mentions metrics, moving beyond just qualitative descriptions.
Yes, bringing in simple metrics can really cut through the hand-waving. If you want a claim or a definition to actually stick, measure its stability.
Like how?
You could track something like a claim stability index. What percentage of the time is definition X actually being used versus definition Y? Or you could monitor the reinflation rate. How many times does the Bailey claim reappear after a retreat, and what's the average time between those reinflations? If that rate is high, you know the process is unstable and likely being exploited. If it isn't written, it didn't hold. Documentation forces clarity and accountability.
Okay, so we've got our artifacts, our receipts. Now comes the tricky part, actually intervening in the conversation. The toolkit provides some scripts, right? But they're meant to be non-accusatory.
That's the goal. You want to focus on clarifying the process and the language, not on attacking the person's motives. Keep it procedural. This helps stabilize the conversation without immediately putting the other person on the defensive, which usually just shuts things down.
Makes sense. What's the first script?
First one is designed to lock scope. You might say something neutral like, it sounds like we might be using X in a couple different ways here. For clarity, could we maybe choose one specific operational definition to stick with just for this discussion?
So you're not accusing, just asking for clarity and consistency.
Stops the definition shuffle?
Right. It forces a choice and stabilizes the term, at least for now.
Okay, what's the next script?
Second is the commitment check. This is useful when you clearly hear both the big Bailey claim and the smaller Motte retreat being used, perhaps close together, you could say. Just so I'm tracking, I'm hearing both the broader claim about, say, transforming the industry and the narrower point about improving this specific metric. Which version do you want us to focus on and commit to right now?
Making them choose their ground.
And crucially, it makes the implicit cost of choosing the Bailey explicit.
Right.
It forces them to acknowledge, okay, if I stick with the big claim, I own the burden of proving it. It requires them to pick their preferred geography, the exposed Bailey or the safe Motte. Okay, and if they do choose the Bailey, if they commit to the big claim.
Then you immediately follow up with the third script, the burden clarifier. This is essential. You say something like, okay, great. If we're proceeding with that broader claim, could we define what specific measurable evidence would actually count as proof? And just as importantly, what evidence would show the claim is false?
Pinning down the proof needed for the big claim.
You got it. You're assigning the appropriate burden of proof back where it belongs onto the person making the extraordinary claim. If they can't even articulate what evidence would support or refute their big Bailey claim, then the only logically found path forward is to revert to the narrow, defensible Motte.
That seems powerful. And the final script, the one targeting the cycle itself?
That's the sticky revision. This is absolutely critical for stopping the reinflation loop. Once you've perhaps agreed to settle on the narrower Motte claim for now, you add this.
Okay, so we're agreed that for now, we're adopting this narrower, more defensible claim based on the current evidence. Can we also explicitly agree that we won't re-expand the scope back to the broader version unless and until genuinely new data comes along that warrants it?
You're making the retreat stick. You're asking for a commitment against future unsupported reinflation.
You're directly addressing the cyclical nature and asking for procedural honesty going forward.
Okay, so you've used these scripts, you've maybe got your ledgers going.
Yeah.
What happens then? The toolkit talks about a two-path reset, right?
Yeah, once the maneuver is clearly identified and surfaced using these procedural tools, there are really only two acceptable ways forward if you want to maintain shared meaning and intellectual honesty.
Path 1, uphold the Bailey. If the claimant wants to stick with the big, bold claim, fine. But they now have the explicit burden to produce the evidence that uniquely supports that broad claim. Not just evidence that supports the Motte, but evidence that could only be true if the Bailey itself is true.
A much higher bar.
Much higher. And if they cannot provide that specific Bailey-level evidence,
Then they have to take path 2.
then they must take path 2, adopt the Motte. The narrow, specific, defensible claim becomes the official standing position for everyone involved, for the team, for the policy, for the discussion. And crucially, that claim stays fixed. Absolutely no reinflation is allowed unless that explicitly agreed upon new data emerges later.
So it's either prove the big claim properly or stick to the small one honestly.
That's how you restore rigor. That's how you get back to a shared understanding based on evidence.
Can we walk through maybe one or two quick examples of how this reset might work in practice?
Sure. Let's take public rhetoric, maybe around a really loaded term like oppression. You often see an oscillation between, say, System X is fundamentally oppressive and must be completely dismantled. That's the sweeping Bailey.
Okay.
Versus the retreat. Well, look, there are clearly documented historical inequities within System X. That's the undeniable Motte.
Right. How do you apply the reset there?
First, you use lock scope. Okay, before we discuss dismantling, what specific operational definition of oppressive are we using here? What does that mean in practice? If they stick with the Bailey, no, it's inherently oppressive. You use the burden clarifier. Okay, what evidence would demonstrate that targeted reforms within the system would necessarily fail to address the documented inequities, thereby proving that only total dismantling works?
That's a huge burden of proof.
It is, and if they can't meet that burden, the only logical position to fall back to is the Motte. Okay, let's agree on the documented inequities and focus our efforts on designing and implementing specific targeted reforms to address those. That allows for constructive work based on evidence rather than an unproven demand for total overhaul.
Okay, that makes sense. What about a tech or policy communications example? Marketing versus the actual specs.
Classic case. Marketing puts out a press release. Our revolutionary AI model eliminates bias entirely. That's the Bailey, loud and proud. But then you read the technical specification, the Motte, which says, on this specific benchmark dataset B, using these particular settings S, we observed that disparity scores fell by 12% compared to the baseline.
Much more specific, much less grand.
Much more modest. The procedural reset here demands immediate domain partitioning. The marketing claims, the press notes, must be explicitly locked to the specific conditions, benchmark B, setting S. They cannot generalize to eliminate bias.
Keep the claims separate and accurate for each domain.
And internally, the team uses that claim ledger. They track every time and place the claim is made. If the AI model gets deployed in the real world under new conditions C and suddenly performs poorly or shows more bias,
Back to the Motte.
they are forced back to the Motte. They can only claim the narrow, proven result from the lab test until they can rigorously demonstrate success under the new, real-world conditions. The documentation, the rigidity, keeps the Bailey confined to the brainstorming session, not driving operational decisions or public promises.
It really seems like this procedural rigor, this focus on documentation and clear definitions, is the only way to effectively counter this tendency to drift between claims.
It forces conversations to anchor themselves. Anchor to specific words, verifiable data, and accountable burdens of proof. It's about building a stable platform for discussion.
So wrapping this up, the final takeaway seems clear. The Motte-and-Bailey maneuver, this strategic oscillation, it really thrives because, while our institutions often reward those big, bold generalities.
The Baileys.
Right. And our memories for precise definitions and past statements are just inherently fuzzy and short. So the fix isn't about having cleverer arguments or winning debating points. It's about bringing in procedural rigor, it boils down to. Lock the scope of the claim, keep meticulous receipts, assign the burdens of proof fairly, and diligently track every instance of that reinflation back to the unsupported Bailey.
And one crucial reminder as you start trying to use this toolkit, always apply that fairness check we discussed. When you're documenting in your ledger, make sure you're quoting accurately, noting times and places. Focus on the observable moves, the shifts in language and scope, not on trying to guess or read the other person's intentions or motives.
Stick to the process, not the person.
And always be careful to distinguish this MMB pattern from legitimate, evidence-driven updates from that Bayesian learning process. The goal here isn't just to call people out. It's ultimately to improve the accuracy, the clarity, and the cooperation in our communications. It's about finding ways to work together effectively without sacrificing our grip on reality.
Which brings us back, finally, to that medieval castle, that initial teaser question. How does understanding the difference between the Motte, the keep, and the Bailey, the courtyard, actually help stabilize debates?
Well, think of it as giving you an intellectual map. Knowing the Motte, that small, safe, stone keep from the Bailey, the large, fertile, but very exposed outer courtyard tells you where the claim currently lives on that map.
Okay.
If someone is making a claim out in the Bailey, you immediately know, that's an exposed position. It requires significant Bailey-level evidence to defend. If Under pressure, they retreat back to the Mott. You recognize the move. And crucially, you can use the tools we discussed to ensure they don't just sneak back out to the Bailey later without bringing real new fortifications, real new evidence.
So it makes the required level of proof visible based on where the claim is currently located. It stabilizes things by clarifying the evidentiary costs.
It helps everyone see what needs to be defended and with what kind of proof.
That's a powerful framework. So now we want to turn it over to you, the listener. We're really curious. Where do you see this Motte-and-Bailey maneuver happening most often? Is it cropping up in public policy discussions you follow? Maybe in your own internal team meetings at work? Perhaps even in the way products or services are marketed to you?
And maybe you've already found yourself in a situation where you intuitively tried something like one of these toolkit scripts. Have you ever used something like that sticky revision idea, asking someone to commit to the narrower claim, and found that it immediately helped to stabilize a really confusing circular discussion? Did it bring clarity where things felt hopelessly tangled before?
We'd love to hear your experiences and observations. Jump into the comments section below this deep dive and start a conversation. Let us know what you're seeing out there. We'll definitely be reading through and responding to your thoughts.